When I think of Eddie Francis, I think of a man who has a great servant's heart. Mr. Francis was a man that made himself a chauffeur or a guide or help to every congressperson that we've had in our district, whether it was Congress Lady Eva Clayton, or whether it was Frank Balance, or whether it was G.K. Butterfield. Mr. Francis just made himself available, made himself acquainted, and stayed in touch with with his congressmen, so that when they came to their district, he could guide them around from place to place. Mr. Francis was a person involved in the communities around. If there was any civil rights activity going on in the area, he was always there. He was always involved. He was always supportive. He didn't have to be the leader. He was just there to lend his aid and support and his opinions, because he's always been very opinionated. But he always would lend his opinions. But but he was always a person who was a constructive element and a constructive help in his civil rights activities. If I have known him over, I guess maybe about 30 or more years. And then he always attended the meetings, and he was always in touch back with the congressperson to let them know what we were doing and what we needed and what the issues were and so forth. He started a business, and the business was he was always himself a sharp dresser, and but he started a business where he sold clothing, and then he started to selling caskets for Tillery Casket Company.
Jake Lowe built the casket company.
And he did that, and when by his personality, the power of his personality and persuasion, he became very successful at that. He made that casket factory successful because he was able to sell caskets not just in North Carolina, but all up and down the eastern seaboard from New York all the way down to Florida. And then after he started selling caskets, he started selling other mortuary items and mortuary supplies. And then after he started doing that, he started with a limousine company, and he became very successful selling limousine service up and down the eastern seaboard. And this was before, of course, before Congress Lady Eva Clayton became a congressperson. So, that was early on. But and then he used these skills, though, to come back and benefit his community. He never forgot about Halifax County and where he was from. He always was giving back and always supportive and so forth in the community. He was fearless, and I can say now I see why. Because he wasn't dependent on a business or anybody here at a white power structure terminating his employment or dealing with him economically or whatever. He had his own set of resources and connections that were beyond just Halifax County. So therefore, he didn't cow or back down to the white power structure. He could speak his mind and stand boldly wherever he wanted to and deal with issues as he pleased. In talking with him, he told me about he's filed 10 lawsuits. He said he filed 5 of them in Halifax County, and he filed 5 outside of Halifax County. And some of them were involving his business, and some of them were involving civil rights. The lawsuit that is so important that he was a plaintiff in was the United States versus Scotland Neck School Board, or you might say Patty Cotton, Eddie Francis and all versus Scotland Neck School Board. That was a case that dealt with the fact that Scotland Neck had tried to create a white enclave. in an area where it was overwhelmingly populated by black people. They wanted to establish a Scholar Neck City School, and that Scholar Neck City School would have had a majority of white students attend the school, and they would have also taken in transfers who were people from outside the school district. That was the way they were going to let in the rest of the white population. So it was going to be basically a white school, and then they were going to leave Brawley intact and let Brawley remain as a overwhelmingly or practically all black school. So there was a lawsuit filed, and James Walker, Attorney Walker, and Patty Cotton and Eddie Francis filed a lawsuit. And then the United States Justice Department joined them in the lawsuit on the side of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. So therefore, that case went on through the courts and ended up in the United States Supreme Court. And it was argued before the great Thurgood Marshall, who was one of the justices at that time. And so this is a historic lawsuit. And I've been told that when you talk about school desegregation, that case, the United States and Patty Cotton and Eddie Francis versus Scholar Neck School Board is one of the most important cases after Brown versus the Board of Education. And that affects every school district in the whole United States. And Eddie Francis and Patty Cotton and James Walker were involved with that, and they're the ones that started that. But and Mr. Francis has not stopped filing lawsuits. Lately, and this is just a few years ago, he and a group of residents who lived in an area just was outside of the town limits of Roanoke Rapids, but the Roanoke Rapids annexed them into the city limits and charged them taxes, and the taxes were high, and because they were saying that a theater was going to be built over there near them, and that ran up the tax value of the properties, and they had to pay a lot of money. So they got, with Eddie Francis and some others, they got with the UNC Center for Civil Rights attorneys Mark Dorson and Peter Gilbert, and they filed suit against Roanoke Rapids. And the long and the short of it is Mr. Francis and the residents of Brandy Creek prevailed, and the state legislature went into session and de-annexed Brandy Creek from the city of Roanoke Rapids.
The Brandy Creek subdivision in Roanoke Rapids is a quiet community. A dirt road runs through the heart of the neighborhood. Perfect if you ask Eileen Belcher, who moved here more than a decade ago.
When I first decided to move over here in this area, I said the only way I was leaving was when I left this world.
Belcher now owns the home with her daughter, Danielle Adkins. 3 years ago, they say they got the shock of their lives when the property tax bill came in the mail.
Never, ever in my life was I expecting to pay this high of a property tax.
For Belcher and Adkins, they say their taxes went from about $700 to $2,600 a year. Their neighbors saw something similar.
Over $1,000 a year for taxes.
The reason has to do with another neighbor, the Roanoke Rapids Theater and the Carolina Crossroads Entertainment District.
We have been in the shadow of it.
When the Carolina Crossroads project began, the Brandy Creek community became part of the entertainment district. Homeowners were annexed and needed to pay both city and county taxes. By 2007, their land values had soared by as much as 9 times.
This was not a voluntary annexation. It was done without the consent of the people in the area.
That's why new Roanoke Rapids Mayor Emery Dowdy says he supports de-annexing the neighborhood from the city.
It's the right thing to do.
With the mayor's support, homeowners like Belcher say they hope their taxes go back to the way they were.
Because I should not have to pay 2 taxes. I didn't ask to be part of the city.
And the long and the short of it is Mr. Francis and the residents of Brandy Creek prevailed, and the state legislature went into session and de-annexed Brandy Creek from the city of Roanoke Rapids. So That's the latest lawsuit that Mr. Francis has filed, and Mr. Francis has made a lot of quotes about his love for civil rights and to make sure that every human being was treated with the dignity and worth that they deserve.